Welcome to the How People Work podcast. I'm Jordan Peace, Jason Murray joining me here. We want to talk a little bit before we even kick off our first episode about why this podcast exists and who it's for. If you recognize my voice or recognize my name, it's because you're still following the Bragworthy Culture feed and now you've landed here and the title has changed. Bragworthy Culture was the name of the podcast from the very beginning. The idea being we wanted to interview leaders of companies that we perceive to have a very, what I call high culture, right? Those that treat their people well, treat their people generously. People love to work there. They brag about working there to their friends. High recruiting culture in terms of bringing internal referrals in. And the idea there was that I thought it would be useful for people to listen to leaders that were being successful in that way, recruiting the right people, keeping the right people, et cetera. And I think it was helpful. I hope it was helpful to you as you listened. But we wanted to make a transition because what became more interesting to us over the course of time and what I thought might be more interesting to our listenership is understanding the deeper meaning around why some of these tactics have been successful for those that we've interviewed over the course of time. In order to understand the why, we really need to understand the human element. We need to understand how people work. And that is the area where we're going to get more practical, get a little bit more tactical. We'll talk about exactly how to go about hiring, how to go about compensating, how to go about keeping your people happy and building a great culture. But we're going to start with helping you understand as you listen to this podcast who the people are that work for you, how they think, what makes them tick, what's important to them, spanning 5 different generations in the workforce. So it's an incredibly difficult thing to lead a company in this moment in history.
Yeah.
And so we hope to bring a ton of insight. And I think as I think about who should listen to this podcast, it's people that are trying to lead really well, people that are, let me phrase it this way, people who need to lead their company into the future, right? If you're on the back end of your company and it's just sort of on autopilot, it doesn't really need to change, adjust, and kind of go with the flow and figure out how to be a part of the future, probably not the podcast for you.
Right.
If you're on the very tail end of your career and you're cruising to the finish line, probably no need to listen to this podcast. But if you're in a position where you've got to figure out the new normal, you got to figure out how to work with these digital natives, you've got to figure out how to do this remote first thing, you got to figure out how to figure out the future of work alongside very few of your peers that are going to also be successful alongside you, this is a place that's going to be incredibly helpful to you.
Right. So if you're leading people, if you hire people, if you manage people, if you inspire people, if you influence people, right, we want this to be for you. And so that intersection, as you said, of how people work as individuals and how they apply themselves to work is something that we think is really important. And we hope that the insights that we can offer help us to be more compassionate, compelling leaders of people and company builders. And so, as you mentioned, sometimes we're going to be talking about organizational and people strategy. Sometimes it's going to be human psychology and anthropology. Sometimes we'll tell some founder stories. One thing I do want to talk about here at the very beginning too is something that you and I both feel really strongly about. And it's this notion that work is good.
Yeah.
Throughout this podcast, we're going to convince you and help you convince your people that work is good. That's going to be a topic that is a thread throughout many of the things that we do because and it's something that's a little countercultural, I think, in today's environment. But I think it's really important for people to find true meaning and satisfaction and fulfillment in what they do day to day. And so that's going to be something that we hope you find a lot of value in what we talk about today.
Absolutely. I think if we understand how people work in terms of that anthropological meaning of that, we can understand how people should work, can work in a really enjoyable way at their work throughout their career. So we're going to study these things together for the express purpose of arriving at the conclusion that work is very good and very satisfying and something that can not only just be something that we get through in life, and it accounts for 1/3 of our day at least, probably more for founders of a startup like us, but it actually be something incredibly fulfilling and central to someone feeling purpose in their life.